How's everyone doing? How's everyone feeling?
Good.
Pretty great,
Good.
yeah.
Appreciate y'all being here again. Thank you so much for being here, especially again, like everyone being from different cities and different times and working on different things at the same time. But yeah, so I kind of just want to, I'm going to start with a little intro. I'm going to introduce the participants to who we all are a little bit, and then I'm going to open it up to kind of talking about how, let's do that as a prompt. We'll have y'all talk about the images that you see and kind of a little bit about yourself, and then we'll dive a little bit deeper later on. But this conversation is going to be kind of revolving around success and ethics. We're going to talk a little bit about some challenges, so things like consistency, how to keep consistent, facing with things like discouragement and like not comparing yourself. And then finally, we'll talk a little bit about the conversation of ethics, but more like imitation versus inspiration. I know that's a really big thing. We'll talk about like opportunities and maybe missing out on something that might not be worth it, or doing. We'll get into it. You feel me? So it'll be hopefully a dope conversation. But yeah, so here are our three panelists. Again, just want to say thank you for being here. I appreciate y'all so much. I mean, Fazial and Jabari, y'all sent me these pictures, so I hope you're okay with it. But Flo, I chose that one for you. I hope you're okay with it.
I look way too close to the camera in mine.
I had, we had to crop it a certain way. I'm so sorry. And then Flo, I had a little shameless plug-in shot by me. I had,
circle moment.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. Thank you for that, bro. Word. So these are our panelists, which I'm sure everyone here knows that because that's why everyone's here, and for the conversation. But Flo, let's start with you. So Flordalis, Espinal, real quick. So do you prefer Flor? Can I just say Flor, Flordalis, the whole thing?
Yeah. Dalis is fine, please.
Dalis. Oh, Lise? Okay. So Dalis is a film photographer from the Bronx, New York. Her work was inspired by the rawness and culture of her own. Sorry, you can't hear me?
Yeah, I think somebody has their
Can we
mic.
hear you?
Okay, somebody had their mic on. Yeah, if y'all can keep your mic off, please. Her work is inspired by the rawness and culture of her hometown. She focuses on amplifying the beauty of the Bronx and its residents through her timeless film portraits. So Dalis's calm approach has allowed her to form genuine connections with her subjects to capture them in their most authentic state. Flordalis has worked with clients such as Nike, Peloton, Refinery 29, Latina Magazine, The Hundreds, but the list goes on. She is the founder of Girls Who Shoot as well, which is an org focused on educating, highlighting, and providing spaces for women of color in the visual arts world. There it is. Look at the photo.
I'm liking the choices.
I'm glad. I'm glad. Bro, fire.
Cool.
Fire. So Fazial, you're gonna be up next, but Flo, you want to say anything about those images? Anything about the intro? Just a little more. You want to add a little more context to it?
What can I say? I feel like you pretty much said it all, but hi everyone. I'm grateful to be here and share the space with two amazing photographers as well. For those who are late, we were kind of talking about like the images that Mav chose for me because I just opened up a studio and I've been kind of like running around everywhere, and it was like hard for me to send him images because I didn't have Wi-Fi, but he chose amazing. He has some good choices because these are some of my favorite images, especially these two.
Really good.
These are really like probably like my top two like favorite pictures because it just like
that's crazy because they're first too. That's crazy.
Right, like it just gives like BX energy, like, and I just like it because it's in like two of like my hoods, which is like close to Cypress Ave, which is where I grew up for like a significant part of my childhood, like the one on the right, in front of the projects and like, this is a really cool image. It was just kind of like a photo walk type vibe. That's how usually my shoots go. And the other one on the left is a kid from my other neighborhood that I moved to like after I lived in Cyprus for 10 years in West Farms. And it's also like my boyfriend's album cover. So it was like perfect shot. Like we were like kind of chasing the sun and like waiting for the perfect moment to like get the sun on his eyes. So like it came out so perfect. And I'm self-taught and I'm like still a newbie when it comes to lighting and shit. So like this was like a really big moment for me. Yeah, that's me. And Girls Who Shoot, I'm the founder of Girls Who Shoot, and it's an organization for women of color who are interested in visual arts. And we do workshops, we do photo walks, and just events to like gather women together and they can collaborate and connect with each other and just create dope moments and dope work.
I appreciate that. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, going back to the first two, you really should be proud because those, I mean, every image is amazing, but those two really stood out and wanted to pair them, not only because they're both vertical, they're both like vertical thing, but it's just they paired really well together. And I think it was like a really good first introduction to your work. I felt like those two really embody not only who you are as a person, which mind you, I only got to spend that one day with you, and I think I got a pretty good sense of who you are, but I think it embodies who you are and your work really well. Those two images just like feel like you. They all do, but those two in particular just like fine. So great job.
Thank you.
Sure. So next we've got Fazial Westcott. He, him pronouns. Sorry about that. I didn't mention pronouns as well. So, Fazial, you ready?
Yeah.
So, Fazial Westcott is an Indonesian-American photographer based in the United States. The heart of his work centers on creating personal work from the street and blending documentary with abstraction. Fazial has a YouTube channel that helps support his travels and passion for photography. There, he creates engaging and educational content about the photography that both beginners and professionals can enjoy, while fostering a community of photographers through a shared passion. Banger. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. So with that being said, Fazial, yeah, no, it's yeah. With that being said, I'm gonna open it up to you. Same thing, Fazial. You want to kind of just talk a little bit about either these photos, the selection process, whatever you want.
I feel like I shouldn't have just like chosen all my photos from Morocco that I just went to, but I feel like it really summarizes kind of like where I'm at right now, in terms of like what I'm doing photography wise. I'm trying to just travel as much as I can and absorb different cultures and try to, I don't know, photograph them in a way that I feel is unique to the place that I'm in, which is always challenging. When you're traveling, you feel like sometimes you don't belong, but we can probably get into it later. But it's these selects are some of my favorite images I've taken recently. Specifically this one because I just love the way everything lines up, and it's like this guy in a motorcycle coming up towards me.
This one just flows really well too. It's very balanced, especially with that left side with the shadow. So there's really not much going on there, but it's busy in the middle. I'm not gonna critique and break down the photo. It's just it comes out of me. Especially this is what I do for work with my kids' photos. Every Monday we have critiques, so like I immediately go into critique mode. But beautiful work.
But honestly, like the world is such a beautiful place, and every city, has its own character, and that's simply what I just want to do with my photography is just photograph the beauty of life. I mean, it's very cliche, but It's honestly the reason I do all this. So
Not at all, but it's not
London,
cliche.
so it's like just a random London shot in the rest of like Morocco. Well, I think there's one in New York with the the hand.
The hand, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, word. Thank you, Father. Beautiful work. And I cannot wait to see what you get over there in Paris.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right, Jabari, you ready?
Yep.
Awesome. So, Jabari Canada. Wait, I'm sorry. That's how I pronounce your full name?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, awesome. Just want to make sure. He, him pronouns. Jabari Canada is a cinematographer who has worked across fashion, music, and politics after graduating from Emerson College in 2016. He is currently based in Cambridge, Mass. to pursue a master's degree in architecture from MIT. Shout out to you. While working in New York City for the past 7 years, Jabari has filmed a handful of brands, including Nike, Reebok, and Revlon, and more. Along with commercial cinematography, his work in the music space has led him to collaborate with artists such as A$AP Rocky, Rihanna, and Saweetie.
Yeah, thanks for that, Mav. And thanks for having me on. Really happy to be here, share these images, and hear from everyone on the panel.
It's an honor having you. Really, thank you. Thank you to all y'all. But and again, I know you're all very, very busy, so I appreciate every single one of you. And Jabari, you're a student. You are currently on your way to getting another degree at MIT. So I'm assuming you are busy.
Yeah, definitely.
Word. So I'll open it up to you again. If you want to kind of give some context to your work, your selections, whatever you want.
Yeah, I think for these like selected images, it's like a combination of like just a little bit of photography like around Brooklyn, like where I was living for a while, like this image here. Like I think a lot about like community. I think a lot about like the way that we inhabit like public spaces. So that's what I was going for like the first one. And I think some of the other images that I selected had to do with either some commercial work that I was a part of, or just some shots that I would grab like during like a film production. And I kind of like found that even though I was like hired to like be a cinematographer for a project, I also just like enjoyed shooting like photos as well, like on set or like as BTS. So that's kind of where like some of these like images came from as well.
Word. I have so many questions, but but I gotta save them for later for sure. Yeah, but you do some amazing work. And again, like cinematography seems to be, and correct me if I'm wrong, but cinematography seems to be your main thing, and then photography is kind of and that's not really something that me personally is not something that I know much about. So I would just love to hear more about that whole side of the industry, because I'm sure that when it comes to cinematography, so maybe like getting a gig for Nike for doing a video versus doing like photography, it's probably completely different. And you wouldn't think so, but I'm sure it is. So I'd really love to open that up at some point in this conversation, kind of just hear you talk about your experiences.
Yeah, for sure.
Word. Appreciate y'all. Oh, not there yet. No, hold up.
It's over.
Word. So we can start with the first section again. So the first section of this talk, I wanted it to be about journey and your journey. And kind of like, I remember when I was younger, I used to always want to hear like from those that are doing it, like the people that I really looked up to, like, yo, what am I supposed to do? Like, what are the exact steps that I need to take? What did you do so I could do the same exact thing that you do, so I can get to where you are, because I want to be you. You know what I mean? Like, obviously, it's not like that. And I think now too, like in my career, now that I'm a little bit further and it's kind of been doing a little bit more, and I'm getting these gigs, I'm starting to get asked the same questions where I'm just like, and now I'm telling these people the things that I used to hear and I hated hearing, like, oh, you just gotta trust the process and this and that. And I'm like, bro, that's bullshit. Like when I was younger, I'm like, that's BS. Like that's nah. But now I'm just like, it really is like everyone has their own path. As cliche as that sounds, everyone has their own path, and it's like what you did and what worked for you might not work for me. So with that being said, I kind of just want to open it up, and I want to ask each one of you as well just talk about your journey. So who are you? How did you get into photography? Was photography your first choice? And just where did you start? Like, what was your first big gig? I know there's a lot of questions, but let's start with who are you? How did you get into photography, cinematography, and was just art your first choice? So whoever wants to go first, I would love to hear a little bit about that question from each of y'all, or I can just choose. Let me know.
I guess I could go first.
Where?
Damn, where do I start? Birth? No.
Right.
So I guess I can answer the first question. Like, so art wasn't like the first thing that I chose. I went to college to become a psychiatrist. So I studied psychology for like probably 4 years. And the plan was to become a psychologist, but I kind of tell people that like psychology is like a good base for everything. Cause once you kind of know people and how the mind works, you could kind of take that anywhere. So like with photography, it's kind of like, I guess it's been in me throughout my whole life, but it wasn't until like maybe Instagram started that like I started like shooting pictures with my phone, and I would like go on those photo walks with like Street Dreams mag. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that, but like 2012, 2013, like everyone was going on those photo walks and like shooting with their iPhone and shit, and like doing like all those like symmetrical pictures of like the Brooklyn Bridge and stuff. So like I was one of those, but what I noticed was that I always gravitated towards people. Like I didn't want to shoot architecture. I wanted to shoot portraits of people, like everyday people, and like people that are just kind of like often like overlooked. And yeah, I would just snap and go. I started with street photography. I would snap and go and like take portraits of people around the city and around. And I was always kind of scared to like take pictures in the Bronx for some reason, even though I'm from there. Like it just felt like I was kind of invading the space of my people for some reason. I don't know. But then I stopped photography for a few years because of, just letting doubt get into my head, and like just, me being like, I guess it's a Caribbean thing. Like I'm Dominican, and it's just, art is not really something that people see as a career. So I kind of just let that get to my head, and like I just worked a regular job, and I stopped doing photography for a few years, and then I came back to it like in 2019, and I started to shoot film. I learned off YouTube and stuff, and just other photographers. I would go on photo walks and they'll teach me like little tips. And I started that maybe like 2018, 2019. And during the pandemic, like right before the pandemic started, I got fired from my job. And I was a human resource manager at a like startup company, and they fired me. So pandemic started, and I just was like, fuck it, like I'm gonna just pursue photography, and see where it goes. So I started shooting. I learned how to develop at home. And I was just doing shoots for free. And I was like, I'm gonna shoot what I want to shoot. And if somebody likes it and wants to hire me for it, like I want them to hire me for the work that I'm doing, and not for some random shit that like I'm like, it doesn't align with me. So I was shooting people, in the neighborhood, just like street photography, portraits in a way. Like I don't, yeah. So yeah, and then brands would hit me up. Like I think Latina was probably the first one, but that was kind of through a mutual friend. She's a writer, Shani, which is actually in this picture. So Shani, the girl on the left, on the left.
She wearing white or yellow?
She's the girl wearing white. So the girl
Uh,
wearing white, her name is Shani. She's a writer. She's an amazing writer and poet, spoken word artist. Um, I did a shoot with her for one of her like spoken word events, and she reached out to me because she was doing this shoot with Latina, and she wanted me to shoot it. She wanted me to shoot it for Latina's like reemergence, because Latina used to be a really big like magazine and print. So they were like releasing their website again, but online. So I took these shots for her. And from there, like more brands just kind of just started hitting me up, and I just started like kind of blowing up, and things kind of happened really quickly for me. I'm still like learning. I'm always a student, and it's just still surreal to me because it doesn't seem like that long ago. I feel like everybody kind of feels the same way with the whole pandemic and how it kind of like robbed like 3 years from us.
yeah.
And it just all really happened so quickly. And then like, and it's just cool to see like where I am now. And like, it's just all surreal kind of. But yeah, that's kind of my journey. And also during the pandemic, or like right before, I don't really know, the years is weird, but in 2021, I started Girls Who Shoot. I put a post on Instagram and said that I wanted to do an all-girl photo walk. It got very positive, like a very like strong response from the community. So I did a photo walk, and it was like in the middle of the winter in January. It was like negative 10 degrees outside, and like 50 women pulled up to the Bronx, to my old neighborhood, close to Cypress Avenue. And we just like had a photo walk in the middle of the Bronx. And ever since then, we just kept doing more photo walks, more events, started collaborating with like ICP and Photodom, which is like the first Black owned film store in New York City. And yeah, and Girls Who Shoot, I'm the
Born.
founder, but I'm kind of like, I do all the organizing and all the flyers and everything. And it's kind of like also another thing that kind of just overnight just like took off. So it's been a journey, but
Yeah.
we here. So
You're here, and we're glad you're here. We're glad and grateful and proud that you're here. I remember when you told me that you stopped photography for a while. I was like, no, it's just that's always like the most heartbreaking thing. And I have a lot of friends too that like they just stop. And I get that life happens, and we get responsibilities to grow for sure. But I just think we gotta keep like hold on to it in some way. So I'm definitely just glad that you just never completely just stopped because of your circumstances for sure. So thank you for still being here. Thank you for being here today. Thank you for being the artist that you are. Because going crazy. I can't even imagine where you're gonna be a couple of years from now. And that goes to all y'all.
thank you. I appreciate it.
Of course. Word. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, who wants to go next? Again, I'm gonna leave it up to y'all for this first part.
I'll go. Yeah.
All right, Father, it's you. So who are you? How did you get into photography? Was photography your first choice? And again, like what was your first big gig? If you want to include that as well, what was your first big gig?
So, I mean, I feel like it goes all the way back to like when I was little, my dad was into photography. He didn't, he couldn't become a photographer because, it's a different time back then. So, his mom didn't let him. He ended up becoming an architect because photography back then wasn't seen as a profitable career path. And that has completely changed today with social media and just being able to connect with people so much easier in this day and age. And I guess it kind of reflects back on like my journey because it's really gone through platforms like Instagram and eventually making a channel, which really like allowed me to find my voice as a photographer in a way. Because, you know, it's really difficult at times to like put yourself out there and like network and like meet the right people to get into the right rooms, I guess. Or but with YouTube, I was able to like bypass all of that, all the barriers of like meeting the right people. Like I just talked about my own experience, photographed or videographed, filmed my own experiences taking photos. And that's how it kind of took off. I would what do you take a GoPro and show just like my whole process of what I was seeing in the moment and taking an image, and people connected with that, I guess. And I think during the pandemic, a lot of people ended up watching my channel because it was like seeing a world that they, I guess, wish they could do. Like, you know, they wish they could go out and take photos like they could, you know, before the pandemic happened. So in a way, you know, it was a tough time for a lot of artists, but oddly, it like propelled my channel to like what it is now. And yeah, I look at that channel as like a way for me to just share my knowledge as much as I can to people, because I get mentioned all the time, like your videos, they just help me with photography. Just they get me out and taking photos, which, you know, if that's one thing that I could do for someone, then it's all worth it, you know. You know, I'll get people that tell me like, you're the reason I started to pick up photography again. And, you know, just hearing that all the time to me is like, I don't want to stop doing this because it's helping so many people. And I wouldn't have thought that years ago before I made a channel. But yeah, it's in a way it's helps people like know about my work. But I think it's more than that. It's just being able to connect with people all over the world. I learned a lot of what I know today through YouTube, so it's kind of funny like how it's coming full circle. But yeah, it's allowed me to travel the world now and do what I love. So it's a bit of like a supporting thing to help myself continue to do what I like to do. But I don't know if I skipped anything over my journey. I think I kind of just went from me as a little kid to what I'm doing now. But yeah, I never really went to art school or anything. I was all self-taught. But that's kind of how I got into street photography. You know, I picked up the camera. I lived in the city, so naturally, kind of like just go out on the street and take photos. I feel like that's how a lot of people learn photography, is like through street photography, because at the end of the day, you're just out there taking photos of things that, you know, are interesting to you. You're starting to like think of composition, framing, you know, how light and shadow work together in a frame. So that eventually just became my passion, I guess, you know, because I don't know, I have ADHD, so everything's like changing. Like I wouldn't be able to work like how you guys work in a studio space with a subject. I'd be like, let's get out of here and just like run around the street and take photos. Like for me, it's like it's just a playground of life, and I just have a lot of joy in taking photos. Yeah, and I guess like it's a therapy to me as well, you know. I mean, I feel like photography is a therapy for a lot of people, but just like the whole process of being out there and just breathing fresh air, you know, just experiencing whatever happens to you. Hopefully you're not getting hit by a car or something, but a lot of the places I've been to, it's like pretty hectic.
Yeah, I can imagine.
But yeah, and so let me try to think. I would say yeah, I guess I feel like I'm missing something with my journey, but it's kind of all over the place.
Yeah, that's. I mean, that was
I mean, Mav, you
great.
remember when I was first making videos? So it was kind of like, I'm just doing this. Let's see what happens.
Yeah.
I don't know what happened, but it kind of blew up. So
And then shooting street in Boston, only Boston, then occasionally taking trips out to New York and then that one time to Chicago.
yeah,
But it was really just Boston. And Boston doesn't really, if y'all ever been to Boston, I mean, obviously Jabari, yeah, but Boston doesn't have anywhere near as much people or like movement as New York. That was like my struggle with me personally trying to shoot street in Boston. So whenever I see Fazial like posting all these amazing just like moments that he get in Boston, I'm just like, first of all, how? Whenever I go to Boston, there's no one outside.
yeah.
Like,
I have a weird. It's a love-hate relationship with that city.
yeah,
It's the city I grew up in, so I feel like I've walked every possible street and alleyway, but
wouldn't
it's
doubt it.
it's helped me become a better observer because I'm literally forced to just see in a different way than I was used to. So I think Boston, in a way, because it was so limiting, not really limiting, but limiting in like the general sense of how you would see street photography. It forced me to sort of move myself in this direction of composition on the street. That's a bit more abstract.
Yeah.
I think like these two images on the page right now kind of reflect how I like to compose.
Yeah,
I
I've
feel
always
like
been a fan.
I feel like our styles as artists are always shifting, but like this is where I'm at right now.
Yeah.
And it's yeah.
Yeah, I feel like for a while now you've been using just your sense of depth is amazing where you use both your foreground and your background to really fill the frame. I know that's not how you started for sure. I remember yeah, and it's crazy to see like your eye now as well. It's just bananas. And I just want to add that to that point, to your point of just like noticing because you were limited, you had to learn how to see things. And to also your point earlier about kind of street photography being like one of the best kinds of photography to start with to teach you everything. Because I feel like street photography not only teaches you like the technical side of things, so but you gotta think about aperture, you gotta think about shutter speed. If you're doing zone focusing, you gotta think about lighting, you gotta think about composition. But then psychologically, I think street photography also teaches you about confidence. It teaches you about
Absolutely.
like the ability to notice. Get me? So it's like I really think street photography is or should be like one of the first branches of photography that everyone should at least attempt
Yeah.
because it really like teaches you a little bit about everything. But the
Yeah.
main thing really is like like street photography teaches you the ability to notice. Like you
Yeah.
gotta be aware of your surroundings. You gotta be aware of like the moment. And like not only see the moment happening, but you gotta see it before it happens, about to happen, so you can like get it. Because if you see it while it's happening, it's gone. Like it's gone. And it's like it's so quick, so
You almost have to see the future a bit. You have to predict because people are actually more predictable than you think, so you kind of like see things on the street. When you live in the city, you kind of know how something might end up happening. So you get yourself in the position to, photograph that moment when you see it. Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Like street photography, I think if anyone's trying to get, into photography, start with that. And yeah, let it take it from there. Maybe you end up becoming a portrait photographer, a landscape photographer, but if you live in the city, you gotta start somewhere. So
yeah. And tying that back to kind of like Florida, we were saying you were doing like street portraits kind of thing, where like which is cool. I know like one of the great photographers, Dawood Bey. I think he started with like large format street portraits, where like it was kind of the same thing. Imagine shooting large format. You had like 5 minutes to take one picture, bro. Crazy. But thank you, Fazial, very, very much. Again, we'll dive deeper into all that stuff. So Jabari, last but certainly not least.
Yeah, and yeah, the question was a journey, like how do we get started?
Yeah, so just kind of talk a little bit about your journey. So like, who are
Mhm.
you? How did you get into photography? Was photography slash cinematography your first option? Where did you start? And maybe even like again, what was your first big gig?
Yeah. Yeah, I think with photography, it actually started in kind of like a funny way. I found a bag of cameras in my basement, just a bag of like Nikon Fs, and they had been collecting dust for a while. And it turns out my grandfather on my dad's side, he was the first black photo editor at Sports Illustrated. Like he didn't shoot photos, but he was more on like the management side.
Yeah,
And he had like a lot of this equipment left over, and I think the love for photography kind of skipped a generation, so that's why they were kind of rotting away in the basement. But I think right before or towards the end of like high school, I found them and I'm like, oh, like this is cool. Like I see that they sell this at like Urban Outfitters or something. Like let me put it on my desk because that's cool. I thought it was just like a paperweight or something. And I think having a Nikon F from 1964 as like a paperweight on my desk for 3 years, like one day I took it open. I'm like, wait, maybe this isn't just like mechanical. Like maybe this thing could just like work. So I like, cleaned out like the dust, and there was like a little hole in like the curtain. So I just like looked up on like line how to fix that and got some like black nail polish to just like cover this hole on the back of the curtain. And
yeah,
then got some like I forgot what film, just some like Triax or something, just some like black and white film, and started shooting around Harlem because I was living in Harlem like at the time. And then yeah, I think I started to kind of get into like street photography, I guess mainly with like analog at that point. But I think right before that, my like very first like entry point into photography was just through like the skateboarding community and trying to like capture good shots of my friends who like, we weren't really good, but we could make ourselves look good with photography. So that was like, really fun to do. And yeah, I think kind of like bringing it a little closer to when I was like really getting into it around like 2012 to 2014, like when I was in college. It was just great shooting in New York. We're kind of talking a little bit about the difference between like Boston and New York street photography. And yeah, it's like you can just close your eyes in New York and you kind of can't miss like a interesting shot at a point, like kind of compared to Boston. I think you definitely have to work for it in Boston. I mean, you do in New York too, but it's just like there's so much to work with, and such
yeah.
a huge city. I think like I think about that photographer, is it like Daniel Arnold, who like just walks like miles all around the city and gets some pretty good street photography. But yeah, I think that's like a really great way to have entered the scene. And then when I started doing it like more professionally, it was kind of like always just like attached to like the film productions that I was involved in, and I would be hired to like be a director of photography for a project. And then they were like, oh, and you take like some solid photos too, can you like shoot photos? So I would do that for like the client. But sometimes like the project would be completely unrelated. Like for example, with this image, I was in Nigeria and I was profiling a company, an event planning company. There was an entrepreneur that I was like profiling for a company, and uh, this is just a friend of the owner who just like worked in the space, and he was like helping us out for the day. And we just took a bunch of portraits, and it's just great when little events like that happen. But yeah, I think I think like the last point with that is just like street photography is just like a great way to like connect with people like when you're traveling, connect on the street and make connections that like don't usually happen. And it's just kind of like an entryway into like someone else's life. And just love to be able to have that opportunity to do that.
Yeah. And again, like kind of the consistency, like in your answers, all three of y'all, we're like not only like the consistency of street photography, but the consistency of just like having this one branch be the thing that kind of like then pivots you toward a certain direction. And it's cool where like all three of you started in a way, like in terms of subject matter, the same thing, street photography, but then kind of like, all right, well, I don't really like that as much. I like this more. So then you start feeding that hand, and then this more, and then this more. So it's really, really cool. And then for you, Jabari, it's like your cinematography, like completely just like whole other ballpark. Like I would love to hear a little bit more about that too, but a little more about like the cinematography side and yeah, that industry. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I mean, with cinematography, yeah, I think compared to like photography and street photography, a lot of it is like, in the moment or capturing like the decisive moment and, trying to like freeze time. And I think with cinematography, you're trying to either like create a narrative or create moments in time. So one is just trying to like, freeze real life. And then one is trying to like, I guess like, recreate life in a way. I guess that's more on like the narrative side, but then yeah, in terms of documentary cinematography, you're kind of yeah, just like using the camera to kind of like be a fly on the wall and it's almost like long form street photography in a way, just kind of like
Yeah.
taking time with your subject. So I enjoy both sides for sure.
For sure. Yeah. Beautiful, beautiful work. And on that word too, like on the word of narrative, I think that's a big thing that kind of like really encapsulates your work. Like narrative. I feel like most of these images and just your work just feels like a story. It feels very human. It feels very genuine. It just amazing. Yeah, amazing work. And again, kind of tying that back to what we were just saying about how we all kind of started with street photography, and then now it's kind of like we really narrow in on this one thing. But just beautiful work, man. Like all of you, just so talented, so darn talented. Wow. Thank you, Jabari.
Thank you.
No, for sure. So I kind of want to move into the next section. So kind of talking about challenges, consistency, and discouragement, which I know we all face even till this day. Me personally, I still do. I don't know about y'all, maybe you're better than I am. But me personally, I still very much struggle with discouragement. So I can either ask one of y'all again or kind of open it up for whoever wants to just tackle this question. But the main question is, and the wording matters, at what point did you stop comparing yourself?
Yeah, never did.
Never.
Yeah.
Never.
As long as I'm logging on, it's like you're always comparing yourself. Yeah, you just gotta take time to like when you get into that mindset, that negative mindset of like you're just negatively comparing yourself all the time, you just gotta log off. You gotta have like the mental strength to recognize, just gotta take a break from being online, and just focusing on your work.
Yeah. No, for sure. And I think you gotta have a lot of willpower for that though. I think you gotta have a lot of like will to just know when to disconnect, like know when to like, okay, let me stop, because this is obviously like
Right.
It's such a slippery slope where it's just like down a rabbit hole and then it gets worse and worse and worse. And yeah, which I think that's just better. Like that's something that gets better with time. The more you practice like that disconnect. But again, yeah, like the question itself, like the wording matters. So I'm just insinuating that y'all stop comparing yourself, where you are. But the reason I ask it this way is because I know the answer is you don't. You really never do. But I just want to hear kind of more about comparing yourself then versus how you compare yourself now as well. Float, I think you and Fazial kind of said something at the same time. I don't know if you want to kind of add to that.
I just think it's just an ongoing thing that you constantly have to work on. Like, I think during the pandemic, like what I hear from a lot of people is that it forced us to like look within, because you spend a lot of time alone and like without like people. So you kind of just had like Instagram and social media to kind of see where everyone was at. So I think that kind of put us in our head a little bit more. So I'm very big on like, just like you come first and your mental health comes first before anything. And I'm a very like spiritual person. And I feel like all these things that I'm attracting, whether it's a gig or whether it's just like someone that I align with that like puts me on to a gig, or just someone that I just shoot that like it's just a good vibe. Like I think that just has to do with me working on myself and me taking that time to like feed myself first and like do my routine, and whether that's like a 5-minute meditation or just breath work or something, like all that just plays a role into my work. And it just kind of sets the tone for the day and whether I'm gonna like compare myself OD or whether I'm just able to manage that with just like checking myself like, yo, like it's not that deep. Like everyone's on their own journey. Like just do you and everything will align the way it needs to. So
Beautiful. And again, going back to like that advice that I used to hate hearing when I was an 18, 19-year-old looking up to all these individuals and asking about like the path and journey, like what did you do kind of thing, and hearing, no, just like, don't worry about what I did, just do you. I remember I used to hate hearing that. 'Cause I'm just like, no, like I need like a 10-year plan of like step-by-step guide of how to get to where you at. But obviously now later on, I'm just like, yeah, just do you. Do what you do what feeds your soul, do what feeds your happiness. Like your path is your own. And I think it just takes some time to really grasp that. Where it's like there is no right plan, there is no path, there is no certain steps, you have to do this. Like it's just, it is what it is, you know? Where not, thank you. Jabari, I have a question for you in particular.
Mhm.
Might be being biased because I kind of also want to hear a little more about it. But on the conversation of challenges, right? Again, like consistency and discouragement for sure. So comparing yourself, but more just the challenge. I want to ask you actually about equipment. So hardships with equipment and what do you shoot with? Did you ever feel like, oh, I can't be a great cinematographer if I don't have a cinema 50 millimeter T 1.2 because they use T stops instead of F stops, from my understanding. Again, I want to hear a little more about that and like comparing yourself and really just kind of tackle that question however you want. But just the conversation of gear as well. Like you feel like gear doesn't matter. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like overall, like, gear is just like a tool, like it could be helpful, but it also depends on like, what you're trying to convey. Like, sometimes you can work with like, really like high resolution formats and like that might be helpful, or you can go like more in the lo-fi direction, like both with like, photography and video. And I think similarly, there's like the breakdown between like digital and analog. And I think, yeah, it just depends on like, I guess the sort of like style that you want to have, or if you're doing it for a client, what sort of vision that y'all have like created together. I think, yeah, so like for gear, for like photography, for me, it's pretty like simple. I just, like all of my photos are with my grandfather's camera, just like the Nikon F that I found. And I haven't really like, changed it up. When I found it, it had like a 50 millimeter lens that opens up to like, to a 2, and that's great. And I think since then I had bought like a 35 millimeter for it from like B&H, with just like with an ND filter. But I feel like during the pandemic, when I was just on B&H and I would just like buy some extra, like I bought like, no, actually I bought a used like Fujifilm X100 or something like that.
Well, we actually have
Right.
I was gonna say, I'm sorry, no, we have a Fujifilm expert here, so we can.
Yeah, no, I wanted to hear more about the Fujifilm stuff. Yeah, like I got one of those, and that was like really, really fun to have on me because it's like so light rather than like a DSLR. And then yeah, for video, I've been shooting on a Sony FS7 since like 2016, and like now it's starting to become like an outdated camera, but it's great for like documentary stuff and like run and gun shoots. And I think for video, it really depends on the sort of like lenses that you have. So if you put on some like cinema glass on a camera like that, it just looks like beautiful. So yeah, I think in terms of challenges though, the only challenge I had was I had a Yashica point and shoot, and I was shooting like a party for like New York Fashion Week. And this was like one of my first gigs when I moved to New York City after or like moved back to New York after graduating. And I don't know, there were like a lot of like celebrities there and stuff. And I was like, oh, like this is so cool. Like, this will be like great to share. And like I shot the roll. And then like when I pressed rewind, it didn't really go for too long. And I was like, oh no, like But I took it as a message. I was just like, the universe was just kind of like humbled me. And it's like, oh, like you thought you were going to like, be popping just from like these cool images, but like, no, like you got to work for it. So, I appreciated that. It actually happened. It happened again. I think it happened on like a shoot with Gucci Mane. So I was like, all right, I'll just like take my time and, this will be fine. So, but yeah,
I
we have
think
a
at that
challenge.
point,
Yeah.
no, sorry. I was gonna say at that point, I think the universe is telling you to get a different camera.
Yeah. Maybe.
Bro.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe. No, I put like a piece like a tape on it, and I don't know, just like did something to it. Now it's okay. But yeah,
Yeah,
it just you work with what you got.
for sure. And I was
Yeah.
gonna say the same thing. I was like, I feel like the universe, especially for us artists with this kind of work, the universe be choosing the worst moments to try to humble us, bro. Like
Yeah.
the consistent head nod between all three of y'all was crazy. They're like, yeah,
Yeah.
bro. Yeah, it really be like that. Trust me, it really be like that. Lord, thank you, Jabari. I want to go into the conversation of ethics, but actually, I kind of want to combine just one last kind of question, one part of challenges into then ethics. And Fazial, this question is actually for you. It's the kind of the conversation of inspiration versus imitation. So, at what point at what point does something become imitation versus like something that inspires you? Where like you look up to this kind of person, and you want obviously like your inspirations obviously influence your work to a certain extent because then you want your work to look like this individual or this kind of photography to an extent for sure. And the reason I want to ask you is because I'm sure now you're on the other side of it where people are asking you, going back to the gear question and like the consistency and discouragement conversation. I'm sure people hit you consistently like, Faza, what do you shoot with? What lens? What this? What that? I want my pictures to look exactly like yours. So I need the exact same gear that you have.
Yeah.
Yeah. So again, you can tackle that in terms of gear, or you can tackle that in terms of yourself, in terms of like who inspires you, what kind of work inspires you, and where's that limit? Where's that wedge between inspiration and imitation?
It's I feel like and with like social media, everyone feels like they're very similar. They feel like they might be like copying someone, but everyone's trying to find like their unique style to like stand out in like a really somewhat saturated, space, right? So you're trying to find like your own voice. I'm actually making a video on this whole topic of like finding your own style and like something that's unique to you. And like one of the best ways to actually do that and like to find like a style that works for you is to imitate actually. You look at the great photographers of the past, like try to shoot in that way. See if that works for you. And then maybe it doesn't. You go on to the other photographers, see how they shot and try shooting the way they did. I think when you're just starting out, there's no shame in like experimenting with imitation of other artists. You're never, I guess, what like that's not really imitating. Like you said, there's inspiration and there's imitation. Imitation would be like you're framing it up exactly the way like a photo was framed. You're getting like the same exact subject, and you kind of know imitation when you see it, right? Because it looks exactly like the same picture someone took. So I think for me, like I'm inspired by a lot of like old time photographers like Harry Grayart and Ernest Haas. Like those are two of my favorite. So if you look at my work, there's a lot of similarities. But in street photography, though everything's going to be different. So it's hard to really imitate in that kind of genre because you're just never going to encounter the exact same situation that someone else did. There will be like similar situations that pop up that you might photograph, but nothing's ever exactly the same. But yeah, it's funny when you're mentioning like people wanting to have the same camera or the same gear or whatever. I think I don't know what that's a product of. I think it's that for some reason people think like getting a particular camera is going to make you shoot the same way. Like I don't know where that kind of mindset came from. But I don't know, what do you think? Because it's a common question that I even feel like I've been there myself, like, oh, what lighting setup did this person use? I think it's more like, for me, it's like more in video, like, because I'm getting into video a lot more. It's like, oh, well, that video footage looks really good. Like I don't know why we automatically go to like the gear versus like the person's vision, or the way they edited the video, because a lot of it is about post-production as well. That makes something look good. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's a product of social media, because it's like everything's more about gear now than it is the process. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that
You
I
guys
think
get
it's
the
a very
same kind of
common.
questions.
Yeah, if you want to open that up to all three of y'all, y'all get the same kind of questions, or even again, just if you personally kind of deal with the whole like inspiration versus imitation, being worried about like maybe the people who inspire you, the kind of work that inspires you. If you're really worried about like making sure your work doesn't look exactly like that, yeah.
I think when you're doing work like in service of somebody else, that's kind of hard, because I feel like in the commercial space, there's so many trends that all these brands are trying to replicate, and they kind of want something similar. And it sometimes makes it harder to like experiment in that space. But then if you're just doing the work for yourself, then you have a lot more like flexibility. And then those brands are like looking at you and they're like, like let's do that on the next project.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that it's all about trends. So like when people are starting out, they're naturally going to try to like replicate like what's popular, and sometimes they're going to think like, oh, if they have like certain equipment, that'll allow for them to do it. But like Faisal said, like post-production does play like a huge role in that, both for photo and video. But like, I mean, I remember I had like someone reach out to me, not even on like my main Instagram, but on Finsta. Somehow they found it, and they're just like, what film stock did you use for that video? And I'm just like, hey, like, who are you? Like, I don't even know. Yeah, but people think it's gonna change everything, but I don't know. It's all about like the story that you're trying to tell at the end of the day.
Yeah, for sure. And it's definitely again like kind of tying those two things together, what you're saying, Jabari, and what Fazial was saying about like this desire of like having the same thing or doing the same thing, or maybe buying the gear that the person I look up to uses would make me either more like that person or just overall a better artist. Again, that's a very, very common thing. And it's getting even more common with like, I know y'all seen it. Everyone's shooting film now. Everyone is shooting film, which I love. Like I love just overall like the photography. I feel like is becoming probably one of the biggest mediums right now. Like everyone is shooting, and I really love to see that. But I hate to see it when it's for the wrong reasons. It's like it's not a lot of people I've seen that they're not into it because they love photography. It's just more like I know that shooting film and having that film look and posting it is going to get me some likes. So and I don't want to open that bag up because then I won't stop talking. But it's a good point. It's a very good point. Float, I have a question for you, specifically for you. Kind of on the conversation of ethics. So, have you ever passed on an opportunity because it didn't align with your morals or values, or maybe you just really weren't vibing with something, or they wanted something from you, or again maybe kind of like on Jabari's note, where maybe they asked you for a particular look, where it's like, hey, we want you to do exactly this. Where it's like, well, you should have just hired that artist instead of hiring. You know what I mean? So anything like that. Have you ever dealt with something like that before?
I think I can only think of like one specific thing, but it was for a brand it was for a clothing store that had like it was just
I
like
was about to say, I was like, you're gonna name drop the brand too?
no, I'm not gonna name drop. I'm not gonna name drop. It's not like a big brand or a big
Okay.
brand, but it's a New York City like clothing store, and they had like just like something kind of displaying like gun violence, and I was just not with it to shoot it. No pun intended, but But yeah, like it was just something like that that had to do with gun violence, and I was just not with it. Because I guess like my work, since it kind of like, since I started with street photography and I kind of like just capture my everyday life, kind of like the Bronx, and like try to just place subjects like within the community and within the Bronx community, and kind of just have that like contrast between like a very like gritty neighborhood and like a subject. I feel like a lot of brands are trying to do that now. So these brands that kind of try to like imitate the culture or like steal from the culture, get inspired by the culture, they like want to hire these photographers like me that are doing that already just naturally. And when you try to force it, it's just not it. Like,
Yeah.
It's
yeah.
probably always people that aren't like familiar with that culture too, that are asking for that stuff. Which is
Yeah.
kinda-
Yeah. No, for sure. And it's like, again, and this is kind of why we're having this conversation, because it's tough. Because it's like, what if it's a really good opportunity? I mean, where it's like a really good opportunity not only for your portfolio but also for your wallet. I mean, it could be like a really nice check. Whereas, like, how do you make that decision of like not doing this project, not doing this gig, not working with these people because they're asking of something that just doesn't go with you, your work, your morals, your values. And again, I'll kind of open that up for all three of y'all if y'all want to kind of add more. But how do you make that decision of like, damn, like this is a really good opportunity, but I'm not with that. Like that's not, you know what I mean? Or maybe flip it on its head. And the other question I guess could be like, have you ever worked on something or done a gig, like if you didn't really have interest in it, but you did it because it was a good opportunity, because it was a good check or good exposure or whatever the case may be. And not that one doesn't have to be like morals and values, but even just something that like, I don't really want to do this, but I need the bread, or I don't want to do this, but they got 100,000 followers, so like it could help me out. You know what I mean? So I'll kind of open that up for all three of y'all, whoever wants to like jump in. Yeah.
It's always hard when you're just starting out too, because you don't want to, you're always scared of overvaluing yourself, or you don't ever want to undersell yourself, but you're afraid like, you know, you pitch something too much where they just ghost you, you know, and then you just missed out completely. Like, oh, I still have that fear sometimes, you know, like, but you know, when you're just starting out, it's always hard. So you're kind of like naturally going to undersell yourself. And I mean, I still to this day probably undersell myself. So I'm not really good at like that whole concept, but yeah, I think it's hard. I think you kind of have to work on projects or choose projects that are gonna first of all like be enjoyable to you. You know, because if you're not enjoying what you're doing, what you're working on, then it's gonna set up for a bad time, a bad experience, you know. And I think, you know, once you keep making work and putting it out there, the jobs that do pay well and that are enjoyable, they'll show up, you know.
Right. I definitely agree. Like the ones that not only that you want to work with, but the ones that get it. Like the more you do it, they'll just
Yeah.
it'll just fall into place, you know. Again, before I even say anything else, I want to still open it up to anybody else if anyone wants to say anything about the same topic, same question. Again, same question flipped. Have you ever done something or not done something because of whatever the case may be?
I think for me, most of the jobs that I like wouldn't take on, like luckily there weren't any like ethical issues or anything that like made me question like my values, because you know, I feel like in the industry a lot of the work is like word of mouth or through friends. So like, you know, gigs that are like really misaligned, like most of the time like won't really like end up like right in front of you, or at least that's what I found. But most of the gigs that I would have to say like no to, just deal with like time. I feel like shooting commercially, like people want things like yesterday, And they'll hit you up and they're like, blah blah blah, like let's we're shooting tomorrow, like we need all the deliverables like 24 hours. And you're like, okay, like seems like you're rushed, and this is going to like negatively affect what work we can like make at the end of the day. So it feels like it's just like not worth it to be a part of those projects where like maybe some client just really didn't care that much, and that's why everything's kind of last minute. And there's so much value to just like taking your time with a project and trying to like get something to the best it could be. So that's kind of like the main thing that I like look out for.
Yeah, and while you were talking, I'm laughing, but I'm laughing because it's hey home, like the hey, are you available like in an hour? And we need the pictures back an hour after that. Where it's like it'll just be like the craziest like turnaround time. And I think I want to grant them some grace sometimes, because I know, first of all, we are just out here doing our best, fact. But second, like, I want to grant some grace because I know that sometimes things really are out of your control. Sometimes things just happen, and I get it. But other times, again, it really is like the disconnect of like they don't really care, that they're not passionate about this. To them, it's just a job or just a check, and they don't even consider us where like we gotta, like, not only do we care about this, we have to put in the work, and like it takes time. So it's just like they put us in these uncomfortable situations. But it's like it sucks. It's like we do this because we love it. So it's like we're most likely gonna find a reason to do it instead of saying no because we love doing this. So it's tough. But thank you for bringing that up. But yeah, that definitely hits home for sure. Word. So again, I want to be respectful of people's time. So I just want to ask you one last question, and then we'll open it up to kind of Q&A. And I'll, again, last question is going to be for everybody as well. So just for everyone in the audience, any last advice to other rising photographers and videographers and artists? Any last advice? Again, because y'all three really out here doing it. Whether you want to give yourself the props or not, y'all three are really out here doing it. And it's amazing. Like, you do amazing work. And it's just amazing to hear your stories in terms of kind of like we all start in the same place and we all start somewhere. And all three of you have worked extremely hard to get to where you are now. So it's just nice, and I think it'd just be dope to get some advice from y'all in terms of like, yeah, in terms of everything really. Like, any last advice for us? Not all at once.
I think as cliche as it sounds, like, I know y'all probably don't want to hear this, but like, just take care of yourself first. Like, once you take care of yourself, like, you're able to make space for all these things that align, whether it's like a gig, whether it's a person, like I said, like just take that time for yourself, because that's what I did. Like, that was my journey, truly. Like, I took the time to like go within, and then I was able to build a community of people that just kind of just saw what I was doing and saw that I was doing it in an authentic way, and just put me onto stuff. And I kind of feel like it works that way for everybody. Like, you never know who's watching your journey and who's watching you put in the work for yourself. And I don't know, I'm not religious or anything, but I guess I'm a little spiritual, but I guess the universe be watching and just kind of just sees that you're working on yourself and just throws things at you that just align with you, as long as you take the time to make space for it. So yeah, that's all I got.
No, thank you for that.
I would say, like, photography is like a form of self-expression. And like, I know, like, when you're on social media all the time and you see other people's work, you feel sometimes bad about what you're doing or where you're at right now. But like, you are your unique self. Wow, that's a tongue twister. But that's like, you can only share your vision, and your vision alone is completely different than anyone else's, so it's worth sharing it. And I think seeing other people's stuff and letting it turn you away from what you love to do, you shouldn't let that happen, because, you know, I think so much of photography is self-expression. So you just let yourself be yourself. And like what you just said, like, you know, finding the time to go within and understand like where your headspace is at. I think your photography will just go to a whole new level because you have a deeper understanding of yourself, and that's the only way you can like really self-express yourself, you know. So they go hand in hand.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you, Fazial.
Yeah.
Any last words?
Yeah, I would say just like you know, like have fun with it. I feel like if you know, if it doesn't like feel like it's flowing, then like take a break. But it, you know, it should be like fun at the end of the day. And I think going back to like the point in the conversation earlier about like comparisons, like, you know, don't compare yourself with like anyone, because, you know, there can't be like a better you than you. And like similar to like, you know, what writers say, like write what you know, I'd say like, you know, photograph what you know. And like, even if like on your mood board there are like a bunch of like shots that are taken in like, you know, particular neighborhood in New York, and you live in like the suburbs, just like, I don't know, find like the joy in like suburbia, and, you know, just like whatever's around you, whatever like captures your eye and inspires you. I think that you know, that's like a great way to start. And even like working with your family, like, you know, having them be the subjects of a lot of your work. But yeah, I think lastly too, on street photography, I remember when I was like in undergrad, there was like this film we watched, which is on YouTube, called like Everybody Street, and that's like a big like, you know, street photography film. So I think that's like always like, I'll go back and rewatch it because it just like makes me excited. So I think that's like a good one.
Yeah. Yeah, I head home too. I seen one like this, like, yo.
Honestly, that's like when I was doing street photography, I came across that documentary, and like I saw like Boogie the photographer, and that's kind of who inspired me to kind of just capture the culture and like the moments and like just like the gritty side of New York. So it's funny that you mentioned that, because I feel like every street photographer kind of knows about that documentary. So yeah.
That's like a rite of passage. Like, you gotta watch that.
Yeah. No, you
It's
have
like,
to watch that.
like the Bible.
It will really like,
Yeah.
it will boost yours. Like it will be like if you're like feeling down and you're like, oh, like my photography, like that documentary would just boost yours and be like, nah, this shit is like what I should be. Like, somebody needs to document this, like document these moments and just life. So
Yeah. I
Yeah,
remember
definitely.
that was big for me, but I had an unhealthy obsession. Actually, Flo, you mentioned them earlier, but Street Dreams magazine was like, bro, my goal when I first started, my goal was like, yo, I'm gonna be on the magazine. Watch, give me 2 years, like yeah, crazy. And then like Steve Sweatpants, like visuals up here were always like really big inspos for me as well. I got to meet Steve Sweatpants a couple years ago. Shout out to him. He was like, I love the moments where you get to meet your idols and they're better than what you thought they'd be, in terms of like, the main thing about meeting your idols is like they just got to be genuinely good human beings. I think like one of the worst things ever is like meeting an idol and then they're an asshole. They're an asshole. Like, they don't care about people. They just, you know what I mean? But that sucks. So shout out to Steve Sweatpants. I don't know if he's watching or if he'll watch, but I met him and he was like the nicest dude ever, man. Like, it was amazing. So I think that really like, that boosted me, where I'm just like, oh, word, like he's actually doing his thing and he's a good person. Like, he cares about people. But anyways, that's a tangent. So last couple minutes, I just want to kind of open it up to quick Q&A from the participants, from the viewers. So I know y'all gotta like type it out. So while you type it out, I'm gonna just do a quick little shameless plug-in for Elevated Thought. So again, I'm one of the photography teaching artists here at ET. We're a nonprofit organization, art and social justice org based in Lawrence. And we develop spaces for BIPOC youth. So really, like, again, so like my apprentices, I have 9 in total. Shout out to y'all. I hope one of y'all in here. Really, I just teach them photography, and they get paid to be there. It's an after school program. If they're seniors, they also get credits to be here again. It's a cool little thing. We just want to grow. We also do creative writing and visual arts. So we have like actually 10, 20 more kids with other teachers and whatnot. But cool. So we got some questions already. We got a question from Jennifer Martinez. I was wondering if y'all could speak on photography as a form of archiving. And if you feel like you have a responsibility to create work, thinking about what would/will outlive you. That's an amazing question. That's heavy, but that's a really good question. I'm sorry if I read that a little fast. So I'll open that up only because they didn't add anybody in particular. So just open it up to all three of y'all, whoever wants to tackle that question.
I guess for me, I don't feel like I have like a responsibility. Like I try not to put that pressure on myself, but I think just for my own like lineage and like my kids and my kids' kids and just whoever wants to see my work, like it's cool to know that I'm documenting a moment in history that like will never happen again. So I don't feel a responsibility for it, but it's just cool for me to know that that my photos could like be seen forever or have the potential to be seen forever. But I try not to like pressure myself as like thinking that I have a responsibility for it.
Mm.
I like that. Fazial, I'm sorry. Were you about to say something?
No, I was just saying
No.
I resonate with that.
Yeah. I just wanted to add to that, to your answer. Yeah, I've always felt like I was the black sheep of the family. I'm the only artist in my family. So I think I feel a responsibility to do it just because I'm the only one. You know, so it's like I kind of have to. But yeah, I'm not gonna dive into that, but that's a very good question. Word. I wanna kind of give everyone a chance to ask something. So next question is from Cynthia. Hey, Cynthia. Does consent ever come up as an issue with street photography? That's a very good question. Open that up to anybody. Does consent ever come up as an issue with street photography?
I feel like that's like always like the number one issue with street photography is consent. And I've always struggled with it because I personally never want to make anyone feel uncomfortable when I'm photographing, you know? And I think it's kind of what steered me to a more abstract view of the street, where I'm not always fully, making people's faces recognizable, because everyone's going off, on their own business, like walking down the street. No one wants to be like having a camera up in their face, So I've never really got with that type of approach to street photography. But yeah, it's certainly an issue. I wouldn't say like issue makes it sound like it's a negative, but it's definitely something that comes up in the conversation. I don't know what you guys have in terms of consent, because I feel like I don't personally with my own work. Hasn't been much of an issue because it's more of an abstract view of street. But
there's some really good videos out there that say again, like know your rights as a street photographer.
sure, yeah.
So things like, again, like you are legally allowed to photograph people without their consent as long as it's a open and public space. And again, there's a whole bunch of, and people will probably come up to you. I'm sure, actually all three of us, all four of us, I'm sure we've had a situation where we're like, yo, just some kind of like situation where you take someone's photo and they're not cool with it. I'm sure we've all have to deal with that to some extent.
But like what you just said about the law about like public space, I don't know if that's always the case everywhere in the world too. Like in America, it's the case, but
yeah,
if you're going to a different country and you're taking photos on the street, it might not be legal. So just being aware of those things.
Good point. Thank you. It's a very good point.
I don't want anyone going to some country I don't know about and getting arrested. So
Yeah,
just gotta be careful.
just be careful. Again, time-wise, so we'll just do one more, just because we're a little bit over time. So is the end result more important than the process? Or are they equal? So yeah, is the end result more important than the process? Is the process more important than the end result? Are they equal?
I like that question.
Shout out to Destiny. So Desmond Dean is actually the other photography teaching artist. So it's us two when we have our kids. So shout out to you, Destiny. That's a great question.
I think it depends. Like, I think it could be equal, but sometimes like, what is the end result? Is the end result like posting on social media and getting like that instant gratification of like likes and comments and stuff? Like, it really depends on what your end result is. Is it just posting, or is it like, this is going in my book, or this is going in a gallery? Like, this is like something that like I've been working on for like months. Like, it really depends on what your end result is. But I think that the process of just making it is kind of more important. Just if you really look back on it, I feel like we kind of just go, well, for me, I kind of just go through the process and I'm kind of like a little detached. And then when I see the end result, it makes me kind of refer back to the process. And I'm like, oh shit, like the process actually mattered. Like this, all these steps, everything leading up to that moment. And for me, actually capturing the image actually mattered. And yeah, I guess you could tie that into the end result, but yeah, it really depends. It could be equal, but it really depends on how you see it and what is your end result, and is it really an end result? Because I don't think there's no end. It kind of could be ongoing, because you could always refer back to your work and have it inspire something else. So there's really no end to it. So.
Yeah, I would say like the end result is the process. I don't know, that kind of makes no sense, but you know, like the end result, you finish a photo shoot with someone, those photos are the end result, but it's the process, because it's, you know, it's all circles together.
Yeah.
Hey, Mav, is it cool if I answer Michael's question?
Yeah, do you think?
Yeah, no, I thought that was interesting about yeah, could photography still flourish these days, even if people detach themselves from social media? Yeah, like the way I think about it, it's like, you know, people can definitely just like make work for themselves and not even share it to their like immediate friends or anything like that. But then also like if we're thinking about like ways to like exhibit our images that are like separate from social media, like, you know, even just having like a few friends over and like putting up some prints and having people over for like food and drinks is interesting. Or I don't know, I feel like, you know, people get really attached to like likes and engagement and metrics and whatnot, but it's just like, you know, imagine someone is excited about having, or imagine someone's like upset about having like 40 or 50 likes on a photo, but then imagine you have like a small gallery space and 40 and 50 people are looking at your work. Like, you know, that must feel like really good. So I think there are definitely like ways to kind of like bridge it in the physical that might feel more rewarding than, you know, how you feel sharing your images online.
Yeah, that was beautiful. That's such a good way to put it, where it's like, it's crazy. Yeah, it's like, damn, this photo only got 30 likes. I got to take it down. Versus like, if you have a gallery, even 20 people pull up, like 20 people is a lot of people. Like if you really, you know what I mean? It's just, it's crazy like that you put it like that. And thank you for those beautiful words. It's true. Like, I think we're so worried about these numbers. We're so worried about this instant gratification, where it's like, bro, 20 people in a room looking at your photos is the most amazing feeling you could ever. First of all, printing your photos, even just you looking at your own work in the tangible, is way better than looking at it on a screen, first of all. And then second of all, like, bro, just 20 people just coming to look at your work is a beautiful feeling. So I think finding ways to kind of like push off one and just feed the other is important, and just not letting social media just dictate all that we do in terms of, kind of to Destiny's question, in terms of like the process and the end goal. Like the process and the end goal shouldn't have to do anything with instant gratification or social media. Like it's just, you do it because you love it, and then people love it, they'll resonate, and they'll, you know what I mean? Like, I'm about to swear, excuse me. They'll, yeah, but thank you so much, Michael, for that question, and Jabari for a beautiful, beautiful answer. But with that being said, I think we can wrap up. Again, I want to consider people and their time. Fazil's probably like 3 a.m. for you right now, so
Get a cup of coffee now. Just start my day.
start my. Oh my God, yo, thank you again. So Jabari, thank you so much. Flo, thank you so much. Fazial, thank you so much. Contacts are there. Again, we didn't get to answer every single question, but for those who have more questions, their contacts are there. Y'all better give them a follow and just DM them that question, and I hope they respond. I don't know if they will, but I hope they I hope they respond, and just thank y'all so much for your time, and for just being who you are. Just please don't stop. And again, going back to that cliche, corny stuff, but just keep being who you are, keep being amazing artists, and just keep working, keep creating, because y'all are inspiring a whole bunch of people, me included.
Thank you, Mav. Appreciate you bringing us all on.
For sure. And I hope to have y'all again. If y'all ever in Boston, please hit all of us up, hit us up, come see ET, come see the studio, come see the kids. For sure. Please just keep us in the loop. And this is great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mav.
Appreciate y'all. Peace.
Good night.